I'm sorry, Ms. Rivas, followed by Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Madison, for your comments. I'm glad we're going to have a dialogue and discussion. It's good to see where everyone stands on this issue. It's a really important one. I'd like to thank the IPA and the Commission for their hard work in looking into this for us, as we had asked them to, and making a recommendation. Also, thank the members of the Council who had a part in establishing the IPA and Commission. I'm grateful that we can now call upon them to do this work for us. And so, again, great work to see them do that. I think this recommendation, or from my perspective, kind of gets to the core of the fundamental tension in police oversight. On the one hand, clearly any system of oversight needs to be premised on two things to ensure public trust: accountability and transparency. So in terms of accountability, that officers and the department as a whole are held accountable if something goes wrong, and transparency, that the public and the council can see what actions are taken and understand why. But on the other hand, oversight very often, not always, but often, and it sounds like today we're talking explicitly about this situation, involves personnel matters, which are confidential. And so we see those two things butt right against each other and be in tension, where we want to have accountability and transparency, understand what our department is doing to hold its officers accountable, but we've got to protect the confidentiality of those officers. And that's not unique to this department, that's all departments when it comes to personnel matters. So I think that's what's so interesting about this recommendation, is that it places the IPA directly into that black box of personnel investigations where the public and the council are not allowed to participate or know what goes on there. And so I can understand the hesitancy and the wariness and apprehension about doing that. But at the end of the day, I think I'm coming at a slightly different perspective from Councilmember Madison. The way I understand the recommendation, it's just so that the IPA can give recommendations contemporaneously with investigations instead of after the fact. And I thought the Titanic analogy was interesting, but I think it kind of highlights the value of having someone to be able to give that recommendation in real time to avoid pitfalls and hopefully get the best result for our departments and our officers. So I really think it's an interesting idea. I don't think we're not changing the decision maker. That decision maker remains the chief at the initial level, and then ultimately that can be appealed to the city manager if I have that process correct. Do I have that? Am I understanding that? The personnel appeals process? Yes. We're also not changing the confidentiality of these investigations, so those core provisions stay the same. It's just more information for the chief to consider in making his decisions on discipline, which is, one of the most important decisions he makes in his role. And again, who could be against having more information, more context, and making these hugely important decisions? I appreciate the IPA's description of how he envisions this working, and it really resonated with me as a former judge advocate. I've served in the Army as a judge advocate for many years. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only 3 years ago. But it really reminded me to the role a judge advocate serves in making advice to commanders who are making similar decisions with their soldiers or their service members, whichever branch it is, where the judge advocate is reviewing, well, I should step back. The commander, if something goes wrong, the commander will order an investigation, appoint an investigating officer, and that officer will go out and gather evidence, gather facts, investigate witnesses, and then compile that all, make recommendations, and present that to the commander, who then makes the decision. But intermediary before that is the judge advocate, who is reviewing the investigating officer's work product and making sure that those findings and those recommendations are supported by the facts. And if they are missing something, they will point that out to the investigating officer so that the commander is getting the best work product and the most information and the most context so they can make an informed and accurate decision. And I really kind of see that that's what the recommendation is, to make sure that the chief, analogous to the commander, is having all the information and is aware of all the pitfalls and is getting a complete and comprehensive set of facts and information to make the correct decision in real time, and not getting, finding out after the fact, oh, it would have been great if we had this extra piece of information, or it would have been important if that witness had been asked an additional question. So I think it's a really interesting idea. I understand the concern and the wariness about it, but I think it's worth studying further. Based on the presentation today, which is a little slightly different from the staff report, it sounds like there's actually three variations on this. So you could have the IPA in its current location, which would require a charter change. Today, we heard from the IPA that you could potentially move the IPA to report to the city manager, which I'm sure involves all sorts of different things. We'd have to think that through. And then the other thing that, or the other option that staff or the city attorney's office had identified is potentially hiring a consultant to report to the city manager and serve in this role. So I'm interested in exploring those three pros and cons, what makes the most sense, which one would work best with our department and our processes. So that's where I am. I think it's a really interesting idea. I think it's worth studying further and really nailing down the pros and cons of those three options. So those are my thoughts, and I look forward to hearing everyone else's.